To understand the true nature of Sam DeStefano, you have to understand a simple, everyday moment. In the early 1960s, FBI agent William F. Romer Jr. would frequently visit DeStefano's home for official questioning. During these visits, a routine developed. DeStefano's wife would politely serve the agent's coffee. Romer always noticed something unusual about it. It had a peculiar, bitter taste, unlike any coffee he had ever experienced. When he mentioned this to his host one day, complimenting the unique flavor, Sam offered a calm explanation. He claimed it was a special blend of rare Italian beans that his wife brewed exclusively for honored guests. It seemed like a harmless, even generous gesture. Months later, the agent discovered the horrifying truth that turned this simple act of hospitality into something deeply disturbing. Sam DeStefano had been contaminating the coffee before it was ever served. For a man who would become known as one of the most violent figures in American history, this act was not just a crude joke, it was his way of demonstrating absolute control. It was his silent message to the federal government that he believed he owned everything and everyone around him. But this story runs much deeper than a man who harbored hatred for the FBI. It is about a force of nature so chaotic, so violently unpredictable, that he even terrified the very criminals who employed him. He was not just a gangster operating within a system. He was a man consumed by inner demons, a figure whose reign of fear in Chicago is still discussed in quiet, serious tones today. This is the real story of Sam DeStefano. His troubled path was not something created by the mob lifestyle, it was ingrained in him from the very beginning. Born in 1909 to Italian immigrants, his criminal history began not with a clever scheme, but with pure, violent aggression. At just 18 years old in 1927, he was part of a group that committed a terrible crime against a young woman. He was convicted for this violent act and served 3 years in prison. This was not a simple mistake of youth. It was an early sign of the deeply troubled individual he would become. After his release, he joined a notorious street gang, which served as a training ground for future organized crime figures. He spent time in the brutal world of Prohibition-era crime, but his nature always set him apart. A bank robbery in Wisconsin resulted in another long prison sentence. However, it was within the prison walls that he connected with high-ranking members of the Chicago criminal network. Upon his release, he was given a role that unfortunately suited his natural inclinations. He became involved in illegal lending and collection. But Sam did not simply collect money, he seemed to collect victims. By the 1950s and 1960s, Sam DeStefano had earned a reputation as one of the most feared men in Chicago. His operation extended beyond simple street crime. In the lower level of his home, he created a private space designed for a dark purpose. While other criminals used fear as a business tool, Sam seemed to use it as a personal need. He would lend money to individuals who were already in desperate situations. It appeared he did this not always expecting repayment, but sometimes because he anticipated their failure. When they could not pay, he would bring them to that private space. Accounts from witnesses and former associates describe scenes of profound darkness. During these encounters, Sam would transform completely. His composure would vanish. His eyes would change. He seemed to enter a different state of mind entirely. He used various tools to inflict pain while his victims suffered in a room where no one could hear. There is a particularly disturbing account of a man who had stolen from him. He was reportedly restrained and subjected to abuse for 3 long days. On the final day, Sam arranged a meal for the man's family at a relative's restaurant. While the family ate and laughed, unaware, Sam was elsewhere, continuing his abuse of their loved one. Later, in a final act of cruelty, he brought the severely injured, barely conscious man before his own family and forced them to participate in his degradation in an unthinkable way. It was a brutal message, meant to show that no connection, not even family, could protect anyone from him. His capacity for cruelty was so extreme that the criminal organization used him for their most sensitive operations. In one instance, a man who had insulted Sam was lured to a meeting under false promises of peace. Instead, he was taken to that same private space. For hours, Sam and his younger associates, including a man named Tony Spilatro, worked him over. When Sam finally arrived, he completed the terrible act. Even within the criminal world, Sam was considered a serious liability. His own brother struggled with addiction and was seen as a potential problem. It is believed the organization ordered Sam to handle the situation. He carried out the act without any visible hesitation, reportedly laughing when questioned by authorities afterwards. There appeared to be no boundary he would not cross. Sam's disturbed behavior was not limited to his hidden workspace. It spilled into courtrooms, onto the streets, and into his own home. He was intensely focused on his own image, covering his walls with mirrors so he could constantly observe himself. He wore thick glasses to create a false impression of blindness while secretly watching others. There is an account of him forcing a stranger from the street into his home at gunpoint and compelling the man to commit a degrading act with his own wife, all as a twisted form of punishment against her. He would appear at his own legal hearings in night clothes, shouting through a device and asking confusing questions to those in the courtroom. Perhaps the most unsettling accounts involve his personal beliefs. A former associate once walked in on Sam alone and witnessed him in a state of extreme agitation, speaking to an unseen presence as if offering himself in service. Observers were left with the impression that this was not an act for attention. This was a glimpse into a deeply troubled mind. For many years, the Chicago organization tolerated his behavior because he generated significant income. However, his instability eventually became a serious threat. By 1973, Sam was facing a serious legal case for a past murder. His unpredictable courtroom behavior became so extreme that the leadership feared he would not only guarantee his own conviction, but also attract intense, unwanted attention to the entire organization. A decision was made. The order was passed to the one man Sam had personally trained, Tony Spilatro. On April 14, 1973, Sam DeStefano was in his garage, preparing for what he thought was a meeting. He did not see what was coming. A sudden blast from a weapon tore through his body, causing fatal injuries. The man who had inflicted so much suffering on others, who seemed to take a dark satisfaction in the pain of his victims, met his end alone on the cold floor of his own garage. The deeply troubled figure was finally silenced, destroyed by the very machinery of violence he had helped to build. Sam DeStefano was not simply a killer. He was a man consumed by an inner void. He looked into his many mirrors and saw someone powerful, but the world looked at him and saw a deeply disturbed individual capable of terrible things. And in the end, his story closed not with a grand exit, but with a sudden, violent end on the ground where he had once stood as a predator.